Fantastic. We're going to start our side event, so I'm going to start by thanking you for coming. And I would like to welcome you both here in Seville, but also our online audience as we are live streaming the event. The intention is really to bring the people to this conference and this conference to the people. So with that, I welcome you to the official FfD4 side event titled Youth Moving Beyond GDP, Intergenerational Equity to Finance What We Value. And it is a very warm welcome, and the pun is intended with regard to the weather outside. My name is Nathalie Delors. I work at the Beyond Lab, which is a multi-stakeholder space at UN Geneva that is driving social innovation for long-term sustainability. And we are here today, and I will have the pleasure to guide you through this side event, because we are at a critical juncture when it comes to financing for development. The continued reliance on gross domestic product as the primary measure of progress, development, and well-being is the issue we are here to address. GDP, as you know, heavily influences resource allocation and development priorities, and as it is sort of used as the main indicator. For example, for determining access to financing and debt relief. But we know that GDP only tells part of the story. It is ignoring critical dimensions of sustainable development, such as social and environmental. And this is why we're here, because this needs to change. And when it comes to change, there is one group of people that have been, and will continue, and have always been, leading change. It is young people. And this is why we wanted to convene this discussion here today. We bring together young experts, decision makers, leaders from different stakeholder groups to explore how do we move beyond GDP, to reimagine what we measure, what we finance, and ultimately what we value. So with that, I would like to open the side event for its first segment and welcome our first speaker, who is Dr. Bebe Köffler, Parliamentary State Secretary to the Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be in this room with all of you, and I'm really amazed and happy how full the room is and that you're all participating, and a big thank to our hosts who are organizing everything, and especially, of course, warm welcome also from my side to all the young people participating in that discussion, because I think it's very timely and it's of utmost importance. We all know that global transformation and growing complexity is there, and what we really need is a dialogue, an intergenerational dialogue in solving the challenges of our time. We have to rethink systems. We have to maybe be challenged sometimes. I'm 20 years in politics, so I can tell you sometimes I also need to be challenged or something. And to overcome status quo and to come up with creative solutions to sustainable at the end of the day. And therefore, I think it's important to get the discussion intergenerational and get the discussion running with the young generation. It's also one of the focuses of the new minister that we have said that the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, which our minister Bali will special focus also on children and young people. So that fits quite well together, I'm sure, with your agenda. And I'm very pleased that we talk about a topic like GDP or beyond GDP, because normally you think that's too technical, don't touch those things. But it's not only about indicators, because yes, we could say it's only an indicator, but if you have the wrong indicators, where the indicators are not including all the topics which are interesting for society, for its people, then the base for decision making might be the wrong one. And if you look at the discussion on GDP, it's a powerful indicator because it shapes policy decisions. It's shaping also financing mechanisms. But is that really the indicator we want to see if we want to develop our societies in a sustainable manner and in a majority of the people on this planet. If you look at Action 53 and the Pact for the Future, I think that gives us the opportunity to really raise that question. Is GDP the right indicator? And probably the outcome of that session also will be that it's not the right indicator because it's missing a lot of topics, a lot of background information, a lot of insights which are necessary to develop our societies further on. It was said already at the beginning in the initial remarks, GDP is measuring economic prosperity, but it's not measuring what is important inside society. It's not measuring if climate change is adequately included in the indicator. It's not measuring the inequality of society. It's not, by the way, I think inequality is one of the biggest challenges we face, especially also in democracies, because that's one of the sources of people being not in ease with their governments anymore. We have to work on that target of inequality. And if that's not reflected in one of the most meaningful indicators, I think there's something missing. Of course, there are other measures of prosperity. We have the Human Development Index and other measures. But really to focus on including, for example, indication of climate change, inequality, I think that should be something that should go beyond what we've got at the moment. So we have to look, I was pointing out how important inequalities for me, we have to look at the inequalities between households, the rich and the poor. We have to look about inequalities between women and men. I was yesterday on a few panels discussing unpaid care work, for example. So there's a big range of inequality between that. We have to think about the exclusion of various groups of people. And we have to be sensitive to the inequality between the generations. So that's only a few examples about inequality which is not reflected in GDP, and why we also think that it's important to look beyond GDP. Therefore, we need a new understanding how economies, growth risk, and prosperity interacts. My country, Germany, is welcoming all this engagement by all of you. It's welcoming also that Beyond GDP expert group is implemented, and that this debate is emerging, that it's gaining more and more ground, getting more and more important, and is coming up with more and more insights and data, because that's at the end of the day something which is shaping the future also of the Agenda 2030 and our discussion on this agenda beyond the year 2030. We want to be a supportive and active partner, but we're very happy that there are so many different stakeholders engaged. We want to be here to make progress visible, progress also emerging from the experts group, and the challenge will be that at the end of the day for me as a politician to implement new insights. And it's always the challenge for politics. But it helps us to make fact-based decisions in the future, fact-based systems which are accepted also in our societies by the people that is they reflecting their needs. So, being short, thank you very much for your engagement. I'm very much looking to the results of the expert group, also to the results of the young experts participating in that discussion. And I hope I can be part of the team which is then implementing your findings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now have the pleasure of welcoming Mrs. Prudence Kaoma, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance and National Planning of Zambia. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues, young changemakers. esteemed colleagues, young change makers, and honored guests. It is both a privilege and profound responsibility to stand before you today at this pivotal side event of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, FfD4. This gathering bridges the urgency of our time with the promise of tomorrow. We meet here as custodians of a shared vision, a world where economic progress is no longer measured by the narrow lens of GDP, but by the dignity of our people, the health of our planet, and the equity of the systems that we leave behind. Today's dialogue is not just about incremental change. It is about transformation. It is about confronting a stark reality. The systems we have inherited often exclude those who need them the most, and in this case, particularly the youth of our least developed countries, where over 60% of the population is under the age of 30. This is not a demographic challenge, but it is a demographic dividend waiting to be unlocked. For decades, GDP has been the compass guiding global finance, yet it fails to measure what really truly matters. Whether a child in Lusaka, Zambia where I come from, can access clean water, whether a farmer in Bangladesh can withstand climate shocks, or whether a young entrepreneur in Senegal has the tools to thrive, it overlooks the very essence of sustainable development as intergenerational. The stakes could not be higher in LDCs, for instance, where youth potential is vast, but opportunities are scarce. The cost of inaction is generational scale. Yet, when we invest in youth-led innovation, skills development, and inclusive financing, we ignite engines of progress that lead entire society, and particularly the young people who are a majority of the population, especially in these countries. So this event that we have today is a call to action. One, to rethink economics, not as a science of scarcity, but as a force for abundance, rooted in human rights and planetary boundaries. Two, to reshape financing systems, prioritizing investments in education, climate resilience, and social equity. Three, to recenter youth voices, ensuring that those who will inherit our decisions are co-actors of these decisions. Therefore, let us be clear, moving forward, that we have to move beyond GDP. It is not just an academic exercise, it is a moral imperative that we move beyond GDP. It is about justice for today's youth and solidarity with those yet to be born. I am proud to support the launch of the Youth Network on Beyond GDP. This groundbreaking platform amplifies youth leadership in global finance, a testament to the power of partnership between governments, civil society, and the next generation. So our co-host, Germany, UNCTAD, Rethinking Economics, and the Beyond Lab at Geneva, thank you so much for championing this critical conversation. As governments, we are standing behind you, see it through. I thank you.
And with that, it is my honor to welcome to the stage the Ambassador, Mrs. Monica Colomer. She's the Ambassador in charge for Financing for Development of Spain.
Thank you very much. And let me first of all express our gratitude and appreciation for inviting us to very key conversation and during this side event that is so exciting with so many people. And for us, it's so important with this very transformative and provocative title, no? Moving Beyond GDP, Intergenerational Equity to Finance World with Value. For us, the conference of Sevilla is many things, but one of these things is an opportunity to try to move the agenda on these two very important principles from the point of view of Spain. First, the Beyond GDP agenda, conversation, principle, and we will explain it later, but also the principle of intergenerational equity. And this is very important. We think, as you mentioned in your concept, that central to the 2030 agenda is the principle of intergenerational equity, recognizing that implementation must be for the full benefit of all, for today's generation and for future generations. And for this, it is very important that this side is really the merge of these two conversations. And on Beyond GDP metrics and this conversation, I think the speakers that spoke before me explained it very well. No? The need that Beyond GDP remains a relevant indicator for economic performance, but the question is that it doesn't capture the vulnerability, the inequalities, complexity of our society. It's also not reflecting the distribution of value and the value of the care work. So it is important to have this conversation, and we have Sevilla, we have the compromiso de Sevilla, but it's also reflecting the need to go beyond this pathway. And Spain has already done some homework on this area, because we did a work with our partners in the Ibero-American community. But right now we are working in a global alliance with other partners, and we are very happy to be joined by UNTAC, by the labs and other partners in this global effort to try to support countries that are transitioning to higher income rate, but also to try to consider also in the financing for development indicators beyond GDP. This is the idea of this global alliance that we will present in the Sevilla platform for action. But it's also important to have the support of the youth to this work. And we would like also to recognize all the work that the Beyond Lab is doing to try to incorporate, to involve the youth in this effort. Because for us, this is very key that the youth are not just the heirs of the economic system, but you have to be the co-creator of this system and of its transformation. And with the compromiso de Sevilla, with the Sevilla platform for action, we would like to move this agenda forward. And for that, we need to advance in some kind of conversations, like the Beyond GDP conversation, because this new metric is not that we are abandoning growth, but we need to really find what we understand as progress. And I think this is a collective effort, and we call on all of you this call to action that the study of representative was asking for. I think now the time is to implementation, to try to walk the talk, and you can count on the spend on this effort, and we are sure that we can count on a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
We now have a special message from Philippe Collier, who is the Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs at the United Nations.
Hi everyone, and a big thanks to the Young Lab, to Rethinking Economics, to UNTAC, and to all the co-hosts for sparking this powerful conversation. I'm Philippe Collier, Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs, and I'm energized to have the opportunity to share a few thoughts. Today, the world is calling out from inequality to climate collapse and shrinking civic space. And young people aren't waiting for permission. They are standing up for climate justice, demanding them to believe and say loud and clear that systems should work for people and planet, not just profit. But let's be honest, our global financial system is stuck in the past. GDP still dominates as the only measure for progress, ignoring environmental health and social equity. The most affected people affected by the status quo are youth, and especially young people from marginalized communities. Here's the moment we've been waiting for. Right now, we can recalibrate the entire system towards inclusion, rights, and future readiness. And young people have already proven the way. At the Summit of the Future, youth have already proposed, among many other initiatives, new metrics beyond GDP. These are not just ideas, but they are power-shifting in action. So let's build on the path for the future, which invited youth as co-creators. Let's ensure you are not just at the table, but you're helping to shape it. Real power isn't given, it's earned by showing what youth can do. Because embedding intergenerational equity into development finance isn't a future aspiration. It's a recognition that today's youth are leading social, environmental, and economic transformation. So let's build a financial system that doesn't just serve growth, but sustains our growth and gives youth the keys to shape it. Thank you.
Building on that, I have the honor of bringing to the stage the powerhouse actually enabling this initiative, the director of the Beyond Lab, FfD4.
I feel honored. I'm not sure if I deserve this, but I have some remarks which I'll go into in a second. But I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you all for showing and coming and providing time to reunite on, I couldn't agree more with what Felipe just said, on something that I believe is really going to shape and shift systems, because that's really what we need to do at this point in time. So my name is Özge Aydoğan. I'm the Director, Operating Chief, also, if you want to say it that way, of the Beyond Lab. I've been personally extremely passionate about this topic for a long time, having been youth myself, right? Maybe not qualifying anymore, but feeling still the spirit, also having a child that I oftentimes think about, what is the future that she will inherit? This is such a crucial event, an event that builds on the lab's ongoing work to catalyze intergenerational dialogues, it was mentioned before, the what's next, to challenge really the status quo, outdated ways of thinking, acting, frameworks of progress. As many of you know, and I think you're here because you agree, right? GDP continues to be the dominating benchmark, although it does not deliver well-being for people and planet. But actually what it does, it delivers profit for just a few. Again, I just want to echo what Felipe just said. Because the way it's been designed actually was never meant to be very frank, also the only benchmark for progress at the beginning. But because it's actually quite simple in the way it's done, it's become that, right? Politicians are elected, as Germany just said before, based on how well they perform on GDP, but not actually really how much they bring about social cohesion in environmental health or access to education. So what actually Beyond GDP does in reality, it does overlook the health of our planet, without which we can just simply not exist, the strength of our communities, and the rights of you, of all of us, and of also those yet to come. Because sometimes, I mean, well, there are a few empty chairs here, but if you have come to our events in the past, we tend to have an empty one, just to show that future generations are also at the table. It's just because they are not there, it doesn't mean we cannot represent them. So also think of those. in all these changes we are enacting today. So at this conference, and especially in this room, we have a real opportunity, a momentum, a responsibility really also to do things differently. The lab was founded on the very belief that innovation in policy, and for that matter also decision making, begins with questioning and challenging the status quo, and to make space for the voices of those who are sadly often not at the table, although they are most, again, impacted by those decisions that are being made. Today, young people are not just waiting to be included, no, we are shaping the agenda. The bold proposals of the youth at the Summit of the Future, such as establishing a sovereign debt workout mechanism and adopting well-being-centered metrics, represents a real pathway to shift financing from development towards honoring intergenerational equity. Intergenerational equity becoming a key design element of it, and not just an afterthought, right? And this, even though they will inherit the future that we're creating today. So we are here today not only simply to discuss political commitments, because I think there's a lot of other events you can go to do that, and technical solutions, we have them, right? But actually to reassert a fundamental principle that the well-being of people, particularly young people and future generations, must guide the financial decisions we make today. That intergenerational equity must be a central principle, again, in the way we reshape our economic systems to build not only a future where we sustain, but actually really start regenerate, because that's where we're at this moment in time. For this, we have to really end, and I would like you to invite me to be open about this as well, really, our addiction, to be frank, to extractivism, because most of the systems that we live in, the gender was mentioned, but many others have always been built on a very key principle, which extracts power from one to the other. That's the same when it comes to society, but also to economy and politics. And beyond GDP, to be very honest, is no different. We have to measure finance and value in a way that really, again, creates prosperity for people and planet. This also means recognizing the value of care, it's been said. I just again want to re-echo that. It also means honoring and promoting environmental stewardship and community cohesion. It means financing models that reflect the complexity and interconnectivity of humans and the planet. And at this point, before I close my remarks, I just wanted to honor and also echo words that are not mine, but that a friend of the lab, Cia Bastista, some of you maybe know her, she's an indigenous youth activist from Mexico, once said in one of her events, why on earth are trees more valuable once they're cut and dead? What type of economy are we in that gives more value to things that are dead than to those that are living? So just think about that for a second. So throughout today's discussions, we will hear from youth innovators, policy and change makers who are working every day, and that's another key message I just wanted to read with you. I think despite all the negativity that we hear these days in the world, which at least for me, can be extremely overwhelming, people are working on change. You are part of change. So I think it's an important reminder to keep that just in front of our eyes. We are here to, again, advance this vision and really implement also that vision. So I invite you to engage, and I hope I paved the way to do that with openness, with curiosity, with a critical mindset, to really enact the systemic change we want to be part of today. And again, thank you so much to Germany for making also this initiative happen. Thank you for Spain for your political support, and also Switzerland that has been such a trusted partner in the past of the lab. And over to you, Natalie, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, we are joined by Alexandre Coupeau, Secretary General del Organismo Internacional de la Juventud para Iberoamérica. And this is all the Spanish you're going to hear from here.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes. It's so good to see a room here in Seville full of youth. I think it's one of the first ones that I see. I mean, yeah, it's a good amount for a financing conference. I speak on behalf of the Ibero-American Youth Organization, which is the only international organization with this legal status dedicated only and specifically to youth. It was created 30 years ago by the 21 Ibero-American states, and it was created to strengthen the youth agencies in its member states, to promote youth rights agenda, and to represent youth in international stages, such as the UN, and such as this conference. I will start using my Brazilian hat, as I'm from Brazil, to say this very interesting quote from Maria Conceição Tavares, one of the best and biggest economists that we ever had in Latin America, who once said, "No one eats GDP, people eat food." I think this is a good way to start this. And to understand this is to move away from a technocratic view of economics that has dominated the debate about development, especially internally in our countries. My take is that we are living momentum when there is a lack of narratives about development. And we have the opportunity to write a new one from the perspective of youth. The development agenda must be first and foremost a youth agenda. Why? Because we are half of the world population, with more of 85% of the youth living in developing countries. To speak of development is to put youth first. The multiple crises we face today hit youth hardest. Wars, hunger, unemployment, climate emergency, environmental racism, the digital divide, debt, and the underfunding of our states. It is youth who go to war and die in armed conflicts. Disasters and crises cause forced displacement, insecurity, and impact on youth's mental health. Youth are diverse, and the social markers of gender and race further deepen these divides. Girls and young women are structurally more affected by this scenario. Despite this, and this is a very important data, only 0.12% of the ODA, Official Development Assistance, reaches youth-led organizations directly. This equation doesn't add up, neither ethically nor in terms of development. Discussions about the urgency of the climate crisis, the immoral persistence of hunger, and the challenges in achieving the SDGs dominate multilateral forums. Yet, the contradiction that persists is that this discourse does not materialize into effective financing actions. We live in a time when 3,000 families concentrate more wealth than the combined GDPs of the US and China, while 3 billion people survive with less than $5 a day. In 2023, global military spending surpassed 2.4 trillion, more than 10 times the amount of official development assistance. Today, 50 countries spend more on debt interest than on health or education. The failure to meet the 0.7 of GDP commitment in official development assistance not only increases global youth inequality, it risks wasting the demographic dividend in Africa and Latin America, the main key to development. This disparity is a choice, a centuries-old choice that prevents balanced development across different regions of the world. This is why we add our voices to the call for reform of global multilateral institutions. This requires deep reforms in financial institutions and cooperation rules. It's urgent to expand the representation of the Global South in the boards of multilateral banks. Without this, we will continue to perpetrate the regressive of net resources transfers from south to north. Even in cooperation, there is an excess of bureaucracy, high administrative costs, and institutional fragmentation. Youth programs get lost in reports, justifications, and unattainable requirements. We need more coordination and trust in recipient countries. The issue of debt is not minor. Youth are the ones paying with their futures. That is why we joined Pope Francis' call for a new jubilee. debt-free climate and debt-for education swaps, fair restructuring, and mechanisms that prioritize well-being over profit. Global tax justice must be a pillar of development finance. Austerity has not generated stability, it has deepened inequalities. This is why we must put the state back at the center of development strategies. It is time to strengthen public policies, universal services, and the fiscal capacity of countries. It is not enough to finance projects. We need to build an architecture of 1 billion. You are key to correcting structural inequalities and forging a future pact, the pact of the future. We need to engage youth in shaping new narratives of development beyond GDP with an intersectional view that values diversity and is mission-oriented, addressing inequalities. This is the only way to actually implement the pact of the future with intergenerational equity. This is our central message. There will be no sustainable development, no living democracy, and no lasting peace without real investment in youth. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for setting the scene in such a remarkable way. And we are now actually jumping right into the issue and unpack why GDP is such a problematic yet persistent metric when it comes to well-being and progress. And for that, I invite the first panel to the stage. So I am pleased to introduce, and I'm very happy for the colleagues to come join us on stage. Apologies. This is the right panel. Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage Antoine Calab, Associate Director at the Nature Conservation Center at the American University of Beirut. We are also joined by Georgia Gadotti from Economistas Sin Fronteras. Apologies, I wasn't trying to be a liar. We are also joined by Erin Tansey, Director of the Sustainable Inclusive Economies Program at the International Development Research Center. And last but certainly not least, Anu Peltola, Director of Statistics at the UN Trade and Development. So as we move into our panel discussion, we would like to really keep this a shared and inclusive space. So we really kindly ask all speakers, if possible, to keep your reflections concise, to really allow space for all different voices to come in. And we are going to jump right into it. Antoine, I'm starting with you. We have heard it actually also from the head of UN Affairs at the UN. Many young people are still excluded when it comes to shaping financial and economic decisions. There's still what we can call an intergenerational glass ceiling in economic thinking. So I wanted to ask you, what do young people value today? And how can policymakers, such as those that came here today, measure in finance what young people, and ultimately, as we've heard it, the biggest part of actually who this concerns, care most? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone, the organizers, Diana, all the funders, and the organizers of this panel. So, what do young people care about? I think young people care about what everyone cares about. It's actions, it's social justice, and it's the ability to feel secure about their future. We know for a fact that GDP is not something reliable. I'm not going to go into this. We've read the literature from Stiglitz, and we've also seen it in person. We've been in countries where you have very informal neighborhoods, but a few blocks later you have some of the rich people. And so we know that GDP per capita, for example, doesn't work. But young people care about acknowledging this problem, not in panels like this one, although this is very important, but at the policy level. I'm going to give you a small example. In Lebanon, we had a GDP between 2017 and 2019 of about $53 billion per year, and that was growing. And then in 2019, we realized, we had the economic crash, because we realized that our currency was way overvalued. It turns out our GDP was $20 billion. So it was less than half of what the economists had estimated. And so you can see that this was really not commensurate with how we measure the performance of the society. So from here on, I think we need to work on two fronts. The first front is fine. You want to dollarize, for example, ecosystem services and values. You want to dollarize how much climate change is going to impact. This is fine. I think it is rational to try and have one language in dollars, but this dollarization or this dollarization needs to be holistic. We need to include for externalities. We need to include for for a lot of issues that we see at the health level. We need to include for nutrition inequalities. But at the same time, developing this GDP or GDP plus is not enough. We also need to look at dedicated indicators. We also, and now I think with the advent of AI, we need to start looking more into qualitative indicators. We have the ability to process large batches of data in short periods of time. Let's benefit from this. Let's have people really relate what they care about in numbers and in words, because this is effectively what should be orienting the decisions that our decision makers are making.
Thank you very much. And I'm not going to take away too much from the announcement we had at the end of the session, but as you know, there is a UN process going on, and the youth network that we are building as part of this initiative would, of course, feed into a very specific set of recommendations when it comes to the concrete indicators that you have mentioned. Georgia, I'm turning to you. So the impact of these narrow economic metrics, they're deeply felt in particular by historically excluded communities. So I was wondering, with your perspective, if you could tell us why these measures are so inefficient.
Yeah. So before we talk about how financing models can better reflect those realities, the marginalized realities, we need to recognize something fundamental, that the current economic models, they don't reflect those realities because they were never designed to do that. Okay, better. GDP tells us how fast an economic grows, but not who benefits from that growth. It says nothing about inequality or social exclusion or environmental destruction. I'm Brazilian also, as my colleague, but I'm from the south of Brazil, a region known as the development one, but there is no actually development for everyone. In that way, I grew up knowing my privilege, and I saw how people in my region were privileged in a way, but also in others no. Like, for example, a lot of people had private public health care, and in another way, a lot of other people from our city had to wait on overstretched public health care to long lines to wait to be really attended. The contrast in that is that privilege right next to exclusion is exactly what GDP hides. So privilege, in a way, right next to the exclusion of half or more half of the population. Sorry. So GDP is not a neutral measure. It's colonial constructed and erases the voices of every community's sustainable life, justice, and care. It uploads the global north model of growth as the only legitimate path to development, while disregarding alternatives rooted in equality and ecology. Now, how can we ensure that our measures of sustainable development actually reflect these lived realities in marginalized communities? First, we need to move beyond models that reduce complex and unequal societies into single numbers. And second, we must bring those marginalized communities into the process of deciding what matters and what should be measured. This means not just including their voices, but centering them in the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
personal experiences. Erin, I'm turning to you. Given your expertise when it comes to these sustainable and inclusive economies, wondering if you could outline really the most glaring limitation of GDP when it comes to measuring this equitable development and why we must urgently move beyond it.
Hello, thank you. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for organizing this. It's really inspiring, and I'm so glad that this group, I've taken a picture of all the young people that are here, which is just fantastic. So I work with the International Development Research Centre, which is part of the Government of Canada. We fund research in developing countries. So the money that we provide is for developing country researchers, universities, think tanks, and local knowledge holders and brokers. And our hope and wish is that investment then builds the capacity on the ground where it's needed most from an academic, slightly academic perspective, which then carries on hopefully over time. So we've been around since 1970. I'm very happy to see Ambassador Monica de Silva here. We went together, I think, the other day at the Care Pavilion, which is downtown, and I urge all of you to go and take a look. But I want to use it as an example of hope, because it is a concrete, literally physical space that is highlighting the care economy and the silent subsidy that is mainly been borne by women and young women to take care of our families, our elderly, our children, our households, and to have that space in this international event and have such support by Spain and many other countries is for me a real sense of progress, and it can't be hidden anymore. This piece, and care is one of the, many mentioned it, it's one of the many areas that of course GDP does not recognize. And so what we've been doing is investing research money into looking at beyond GDP. We did a research project with the IFSD looking at 3 countries, very different countries: Indonesia, Ethiopia, and Trinidad. So very different parts of the world. And what we wanted to find out was, is it possible to actually collect the data of the comprehensive wealth indicators, or the beyond GDP indicators? Is it even possible? Is that data out there? And yes, ultimately, it is possible. It took a long time to get that data, but it is possible, it is there. And what we did was we worked with universities and actually had to help build a multi-sectoral kind of group of researchers and academics that didn't normally work together. So statisticians do their statistics work, and the environmentalists do their environment work, and the gender and social equity people do their own stuff. So we have to get them all together, and I think that's really exciting. And of course, most of the researchers there are young people. They're young people at the beginning of their careers, and so for me, it brings hope that they can really drive this. I know you asked me about what are some of them. I think we have a pretty good understanding of where the barriers are, but let me just give you a few things about what kind of planned activities we have that IRC also supported. So we're going to be, so we know that university students, particularly those in their master's and PhD levels, are interested in this space, and so to address this, we're currently developing an online tool to enhance their understanding of this extremely complicated. The idea that not complicated, to get the data right is not an easy thing, and so an online tool is being rolled out, and also it's not an easy thing for policymakers necessarily to understand. So we're also providing some guidance in interpreting beyond GDP measures and metrics, and in identifying policy recommendations that actually promote sustainability and long-term thinking. I will stop there. There are a lot of other things that you said. So back to you, Natalie.
Thank you very much, including for sharing this message of hope. And you've discussed data, which is actually the perfect segue to Anu. We would like to know from you, what are countries actually saying on GDP? And what are some of the practical and political challenges they face in adopting alternative frameworks? Also linked to the work that you are doing with regards to the systems of national account. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It's really my pleasure to be here. I feel deeply responsible for the shortcomings of statistics as a statistician, but also very concerned about global challenges that the numbers reveal today. And I'm deeply inspired by the discussion today and by the measurement challenges that we have. GDP has long been really the cornerstone of measuring economic activity. It is a robust standard measure that is used widely. Thanks to decades of global support and collaboration, nearly all countries in the world compile GDP. So it is a UN success story. It provides a language spoken by policymakers, by statisticians and economists. So it is very strong. But GDP was never meant to be a measure of what matters, or progress, or well-being, or sustainability. It tells us how much we produce, but not whether that production is sustainable, equitable, or even beneficial. It counts the cost of rebuilding, for instance, after a disaster. It provides zero value to a parent caring for their child, and as mentioned, to a forest that remains standing. But GDP today is not the same it has been decades ago. The updated system of national accounting, just endorsed by the UN Statistical Commission, marks a major step forward. It enhances the accounting for digitalization, the informal and care economies, and the definition of natural resources. It also recognizes data as an economic asset. But complementing GDP is necessary. It's not easy. Many have pioneered such approaches, like well-being budgets or environmental accounts, but these remain highly varied. What we need is a common vision that reflects the diverse realities of human development across countries. More than a technical effort, it's really a transformation in how we define and pursue progress for ourselves, for our children, and in the future generations. And here I share the responsibility with the rest of the world. This is why the Secretary General just launched a high-level independent expert group to work on new metrics of progress, an initiative that we are supporting in UNCTAD with UNDESA and UNDP as the co-secretariat. We need the voices of youth. We need to co-create. I think the messages from here have to be conveyed loudly to the high-level expert group so that they hear it's not just about new measurements, it is about what we value as progress, and those should be reflected by the metrics. There are real challenges why this hasn't been done already, because there are many initiatives and there has been a lack of common approach and a common language. So we hope that now this global effort can create some consensus. Second, the data and digital divide. Many countries lack the capacity to measure well-being, inclusion, sustainability especially. We need a major capacity building effort, the likes of the one that was there for GDP and the system of national accounts, but it's much more massive and it's much more challenging to measure social and environmental aspects. But there's been a lot of progress thanks to the 2030 agenda and its indicator framework. Third, final challenge is that many countries have weak institutions and fewer resources, which hold them back from gaining progress and development. The global community must come together, and that's why we're in Sevilla. Also, there's a global alliance on Beyond GDP that was launched here. It's not about it's about completing the picture. We still need the measure of economy, but we need a measure that doesn't just measure the quantity of growth, but the quality of growth, not just the speed of progress but sustainability. Not just the sum of wealth, but the value it brings to people and the planet. And we need to do this in an open process in co-creation with the young generation.
And we have heard it. This was an open invitation for young people to engage with the high-level expert group. So we are going to take you on that. We have collected a few questions from our online audience, again with the intention of bringing the world to this conference. We have been collecting those via Mentimeter, so my colleagues are just sharing them with me. So we have a question from Amrit from India, and it's actually a great question that maybe I could ask each and every one of you with the intention maybe as a rapid fire. So in 1 or 2 words, if you could answer the question, what is one critical element needed to go beyond GDP? Should I start with you, Alfred? It's a tough one to respond in 1 or 2 words.
2 words. Education and activism.
For me, I believe is, I think resource allocation.
Karen?
I would say strong partnerships to get to the a standardized way of actually measuring beyond GDP data.
I had 2 words, but since you said actually collaboration, I'm going to say solidarity.
Well, we know the road ahead, we know what we need. So with that, I thank all the panelists for sharing their thoughts in such an honest and impactful way. Thank you very much. And I am pleased to introduce our second panel, and as we are running out of time, you will hear less and less from me to really give the space to the fantastic speakers that we have. I'd like to introduce for our second panel, Her Excellency Ambassador Nomi Espinosa Madrid, Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States. Thank you. We have Amanda Hiden, Climate Finance and Policy Specialist. Borja Santos Boras, Vice Dean at the IE School of Politics, Economics and Global Affairs. Marcela Fabretto, Chief of the Sustainable Development Section at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And I'm going to ask perhaps my fantastic colleague Bing to come with a chair, if that's possible. I think there are a few here. She is the Senior Policy Advisor at the International Institute for Sustainable Development. A warm welcome to the panel. I would like to start with you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for joining us and for bringing your regional perspective. So I'd like to know, what are some of the practical steps that governments can take to shift away from GDP and set to use priorities in sustainable financing? Over to you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. Thank you to the organizers and to all of the attendees. I will be very concrete and brief to the point because I know we're short on time, but some of those solutions that we need to take that I would recommend are seizing the demographic dividend by empowering youth, especially young women. We have spent more than a decade discussing the demographic dividend without truly harnessing it. In the Greater Caribbean, for example, 43% of the population is under the age of 25. And furthermore, it is essential to recognize the contribution of young women to this dividend, including both paid and unpaid care work. Gender equality must be central not only as a global aspiration, but also within the younger generation itself. Thanks to the efforts of women movements, often led by young women, we've made progress, but we need to accelerate the pace to close gender gaps. This requires investing in youth-led initiatives and unlocking talent. We are witnessing the most educated generation in our history, but without enabling conditions, they cannot fully contribute to inclusive economic growth. Within this, development must be centered on people, dignity, and human rights by investing in social protection, quality healthcare, and education, and by combating gender-based violence and exclusion. Development must be measured by how it improves lives and ensures rights, especially for populations in situations of vulnerability. Sadly, youth are still one of the groups in vulnerable situations, particularly at the intersection of gender, race, poverty, and geography. A second solution is making the structural vulnerabilities of the Greater Caribbean visible in the financial architecture. Our region faces structural conditions that limit development and must be addressed by any financing solution. Many Caribbean countries carry high public debt, above 70% of GDP in some cases, largely due to the cost of recovering for recurring natural shocks. The Greater Caribbean is highly prone to hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, and other disasters that can devastate entire economies. Just as one example, Dominica suffered damages equivalent to 226% of its GDP after Hurricane Maria in 2017. As a result, Caribbean states are often focused on debt to rebuild, and under current financial rules, they fall into a vulnerability trap. Markets charge higher rates of premiums for their disaster exposure, raising credit costs. A significant share of national revenue ends up servicing debt instead of funding social investment. We must ensure that international development financing mechanisms recognize these structural vulnerabilities. This requires moving beyond GDP per capita as an eligible criteria and adopting multidimensional vulnerability indicators so that debt levels in solidarity and climate threats translate into concessional support and debt relief. It also calls for innovative financial solutions to break the debt disaster cycle. And my third solution is promoting youth as transformative agents for intergenerational equity by recognizing and harnessing their contributions beyond the role as the labor force. Achieving intergenerational equity means involving youth as partners in economic and social transformation. Young people in the Greater Caribbean are not only the workforce of the future, they are already leading change in their communities when they are recognized and supported. This means establishing effective youth institutional participation mechanisms that go beyond symbolic youth councils and forums. It means involving them in decision-making at all levels, from household to public to policy making. Let's ask ourselves honestly, are we truly committed to this? What meaningful leadership positions are we offering young people in our companies, governments, and organizations? And finally, it also means directly funding youth-led projects, investing in the transformative power of this generation, the most connected, educated, and climate and justice conscious. It is essential to achieve innovative and sustainable solutions that benefit both present and future generations. Intergenerational equity must be built today by empowering youth as catalysts for the kind of development this region truly values. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for outlining these solutions, and I think as a young woman, there's also a very personal thanks to you for getting a strong call for gender equality. Aman, we're going to keep talking about solutions, so we would like to know from you, what are some of the promising youth-led innovations when it comes to reshaping financial systems, and how can actually institutions better support and scale them?
Thank you, Natalie, and for everyone for being here, having to see a full room and recognizing that it's a topic that resonates with everyone here. In terms of initiatives, I come from Tunisia, so I'm in North Africa, and I'm seeing a lot of initiatives coming from my very own friends. So, for example, there is this initiative called Fruity, which is an initiative that's aimed at facilitating online payments for people in Tunisia, which is something that is not always easy, and I understand that some stuff might be basic in some geographies, but it's not the case. I have a friend who's leading an initiative called Artisan, which is linking local artisans by international buyers, and then also carrying on my own scout hats. As a scout, we have this World Scout Donation platform where instead of having these long pages of concept notes that people want to, or have to apply for to mobilize one project or initiative, they just apply, they trust it, they showcase, they build a case, and then they get the funding. So as to build this trust, but also an agile system that makes the initiatives work without having to go through a lot of things. But then at the same time, when we know that we're now talking about solutions, it's important that while young people are coming with innovations, it's important that they're not steering in one direction while the system is steering the other way. You can innovate, you can make it work, but then there's only so much you can do. So it is important that there is this systemic change that we all keep on talking about, but maybe we're all here in the same room having the same mindset. So it's important that it gets even broader, because I was once, while I was doing my master's, and I got lucky and grateful to be in the One Life event. It's with all the big institutions, but then coming from courses about rethinking economic development, about care and resilience, and then going out there, I felt like I was naive, talking about metrics, about only GDP, only pure growth, not green growth. I felt like, yeah, I think me and my people are in a different world, a different reality, and this is where it hits. So we need to keep on talking, we need to keep on approaching this, but then to make sure we broaden the circle and have people from different points of view who do this. So to answer on what institutions can do, I think a senior dual approach, as my colleagues also from the previous panel mentioned, what young people do is also what other people do or want. But then at the same time, there's this youth-focused initiatives that can already help catalyze some of the youth innovations in terms of funding, in terms of capacity building, especially because we don't want to be taught specific things, but we want to be taught how to be adaptable, and then we'll make it work, because tomorrow's problems are not today's problem. And then at the same time, it's important that public budgets reflect more some care and some resilience, as opposed to just like things that we can measure. And then it's important that development becomes a right, not just a luxury, and without looking at this from a double standard perspective, because we know it is always the case. And it's important to reward well-being and avoid fragmentation, so to look at the long term and not just stick to the short-term wins and then that's it, because that's not going to be unfortunately. Thank you.
Well, if you need one more proof that youth is leading the way, here it was. Now over to you, Borja. We would like to know, coming again from the academic side, which alternative indicators or models actually offer the most promise beyond GDP, and how could these be mainstream discussed when it comes to all these processes now being established? Over to you.
Hello? One more? No. Okay, very good. Thank you, Amal. I was a scout as well. Scouts measure development in a particular way as well. Then, when I work in a university with a lot of students, with a lot of youth, and I teach one course on development. So in the first lesson, what I do is I put students in pairs, and one student uses a virtual reality headset with a video of a city. The student doesn't know which city it is, right? So one student is focused on the video, and the other student cannot see anything, because the other student, imagine I'm with the headset, watching my video of a city, so you cannot see what I'm seeing. So I ask the peer, you need to identify and ask questions to see the development of the city or the context your peer is right now watching, right? So they start asking each other questions. And then after 5 minutes, I ask them, okay, what are the characteristics of, is it developed or not? And how do you measure that it's developed or not? And we find out that every peer of students, every pair, they are using completely different characteristics. One focus more on the way they were dressing. Other people were more on the security in the streets, or on the asphalt, on the road. So every of them, they were, and why? And I'm asked why? Because development is subjective. I mean, it's a concept that is subjective, right? So it's very important when we measure that even though we find standards, each society needs to find out the adequate models, right, that they need to follow, and therefore decide the indicators. So we explain, but measuring is very important because depending on what you measure, you will have different public policies. So if you just measure the GDP per capita, therefore you will focus your public policies on increasing the economic growth, GDP per capita, but you forget other dimensions, right? So if you have a hammer, all your problems are nails, right? So this is really important. So then we explain, in my view, how development has been evolving. So GDP has been a very good measurement, right? Because it is standardized. Every country can measure GDP per capita, so it's wonderful. So, but later in the 80s, 90s, we have this capability approach, thanks to 5%, Nussbaum, etc. And then we have this multidimensional aspect, right? So it's important to have water, access to health, education, and even became, at the beginning it was simple, like we find the Human Development Index, but it became complex like the Sustainable Development Goals. We have many different dimensions. But the idea there is, well, you reach a minimum, right? So if you, it's this idea of poverty. If you have a deprivation, if you don't reach some threshold, you are poor. And if you move forward, the more you are developed, right? But there was something missing, the externalities, right? And then some frameworks started including the damage in the environment. What is the environmental footprint in your development, right? What are the carbon emissions? So on top of measuring different dimensions, you need to measure externalities. Is that enough? Not really. Why? Because is it enough that all the society reach a minimum, a threshold? No. What you need to provide to the society is dignity. The next level of development is aid. It's not only about reaching minimums, it's about that all of us, they need to be very close to the average, right? Because we have a constitution, every country provides a context, so every of us needs to be close to that average, right? Not just accomplish a minimum. So this is the idea of social exclusion, right? Of identifying which groups are marginalized, right? The next level will be, okay, we measure different dimensions, but we also need to measure what we call well-being. That is life satisfaction. So it's not only just a number of dimensions, it's happiness, it's quality of life, it's life satisfaction. What do we measure with that, right? Identifying well-being. And finally, maybe something that we are talking today, maybe the last level of complexity, or the last advancements in measuring development might be intergenerational approach. Why? Because there are so many countries with so much debt and so scared fiscal deficit that how they can invest in their youth. There is the shift in the demographic pyramid are so big that countries need to invest so much in pensions that how they can invest in the youth. There is so many people in the pyramid that are about 60 years old that are voting that how policymakers can give priority to 10% of the society, even though I recognize it, some countries in the global south is complete majority, and worldwide is a complete majority, right? What about access to housing? So maybe that is the next level of putting in the measurements, right? And then is there any standardized measurement? Well, luckily we have the SDGs, we have the Agenda 2030, that is a common standard for all of us. But then every country, they need to choose, right? They need to choose that lens, that headset, to really pass their public policies, to pass their annual budgets with that lens, right? We identify, for instance, we know Bhutan, who did it 30 years ago and focused on happiness, introducing elements like psychological well-being, the use of your time, working or leisure, the culture, protecting your arts, your dressing, your communities. Then we have Scotland in 2007 developed a national performance framework. In 2008, for instance, Ecuador and Bolivia, with the new constitution, introduced elements of the indigenous community to be in harmony with the nature, with the community. In 2010, UK developed a national well-being measurement with 10 different domains. In the US, Santa Monica State developed the Santa Monica Wellbeing Project, for instance. Iceland, in 2019, developed the Wellbeing Index with 40 indicators. New Zealand, in the same year, the Wellbeing Budget. Canada, in 2021, the Quality of Life Framework. Chile, in 2021, the Wellbeing Survey, Encuesta de Bienestar Social. Australia, 2023, Measuring What Matters. But if you analyze all of them are different, right? So the challenge is, each society, they need to go through all these steps of being aware of inequality, being aware of multidimensional, being aware of what well-being means, being aware of the intergenerational challenges, and decide their own framework. Thank you very much.
How the intergenerational approach actually fits with these different levels and steps that you outlined. And actually also showing us the power of technology being used for good. I am now turning to you, Marcella, with a different concept that is actually sort of the umbrella concept that you're going to speak about, and tell us how this human rights economy could become a guiding framework for redefining financing for development and moving beyond GDP.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I think I'll skip a lot of points that have been made by other panelists because we're running out of time, but it also allows me to focus on what are really the key issues here from a human rights perspective. For us, this is a central conversation and policy developments that relates to the human rights economy, which is a vision that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is promoting to build economies that prioritize rights, prioritize the planet. How? By grounding economic policy and choices in existing human rights economic standards. So it's not about new standards, it's really like really capitalizing on what is out there, and several that connects to budget decision, that connects to designing and implementing taxation systems, in addition to equality, non-discrimination, transparency. So the idea is really to build economies that work for all and using state human rights obligations, which are legally binding. And I think this is very important when we go and start thinking of how we develop a new measurement. And it's really my second point. The value of using human rights norms standards is that these are universally agreed standards. We don't need to get, especially in a moment which is extremely polarized, politically divided, it helps to sort of go back to legally binding obligations and make the most of those standards for the discussion. And maybe we can start also putting forward what is it that would be extremely useful to measure from a human rights perspective, because it's clear that rethinking our economic system, shifting our economic paradigms towards human rights economies really requires that redefinition of metrics. A few suggestions. It would be extremely important to have measurement of the extent to which economic policy decision leads to investment of resources into public services. This links very much to the requirement of the Covenant of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights on maximizing available resources towards progressive realization of human rights. It's always, not always, it's often treated as a nice to have aspirational goal, but this is a legal obligation. And if you think of the implications of making it part of an economic policy decision, it is far-reaching. Of course, we will need to have a way to measure the impact of inequalities and discrimination of specific policies, including gender-based disparities. We will need to recognize the economic and social value of unpaid parent support work, absolutely crucial, central. And we will need to embrace innovative data sources, including citizen-generated data sources. And here I want to go back to something that Anu, you said about going the extra mile, not to fill data gaps. I have to say that in relation to SDG indicators and data collection, something that at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights we found extremely promising is to create a connection at the country level between the National Human Rights Institution and the National Statistical Office, which do not necessarily speak to one another, but where there are incredible synergies in terms of defining methodology and data that maybe the National Statistical Office thinks are not available, but they are available on the other side. And we have a very good example in Kenya how the cooperation that we built between these two institutions led to starting measuring and collecting data on critical indicators of the 2030 agenda, notably SDG 16. So this is really a concrete avenue also in terms of investing resources and building capacity. So two final points, very quick. One is that it's important to recognize that this is a human rights issue, the development of metrics linked to the human rights economy, but also receiving a lot of growing attention at the Human Rights Council too, as in recognition that this has profound implications for human rights. And we recently had, just a few months ago, a very dynamic discussion at the Council, and there's now a report on the initial discussion among member states on how you connect human rights with beyond GDP. And so this is one. And the second is to say that as an office, we're really committed to work with ANTEL and all the part Beyond Love and the partners in this room on the way forward, and really developing the human rights proposal for these indicators. There will be an expert meeting that we're organizing with a mix of member states and experts between October and November. So if some of you are interested in being part of that conversation, please let us know, because that space is really open for partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcella. And again, I hope all the young people, apologies, no matter from where they're coming, are also going to take up that invitation that there is another important debate going on that we have been invited to. And with that, I'm turning to Vin, actually, at national level is a very good segue, to learn more about the insights and the lessons that have emerged from IFD's research that could support countries in adopting models that go beyond GDP.
Can you hear me? Yes, very good. I feel like I'm switching hats today. I feel a bit more comfortable here than taking photos, but it's nice to join such great experts today. I think a lot of what has been said I completely agree with, and I probably won't repeat, so maybe I'll sum up with 3 key points that I think are really critical to help countries really transition to go beyond GDP. And I think the first lever, and I've heard it a lot throughout this conference, is collaboration. It's very simple, but it's collaboration across all levels, but especially the international system. And it's really great to see this lever in motion today. So, aside from being here at FfD4, we also have the high-level expert group of the UN Secretary General to come up with indicators that are universally applicable and set a common standard of how countries can move forward. And equally, we have governments and we have institutions from human rights to trade and development coming together to really push this alliance forward. And I think that's really, really, really important. And we certainly have young people. I just want to say, whoop, whoop, young people out there. Thank you for showing up. I think this is a really important conversation for you to contribute to, and part of this Youth Moving Beyond initiative is to get you in the process. I think we've had enough of talking about young people. It's about time you create your own future. And then this is momentum. So this brings me to my second point, the second lever, which is building up a common knowledge base, including the various approaches and metrics that we already have out there. It's not a question about data. I know a lot of people have said the data is out there, and in fact 70% of the data that we have used at IAC to assess comprehensive wealth with the support of IDRC come from national statistical offices and also from central banks, and the rest from international sources. So the data is out there, and it's really about equipping countries to integrate that data into their national policy frameworks and helping them use what is available in their own local context to choose the right alternative indicators that work for them. And this brings me to my third and final, most critical lever, which is essentially helping governments know what they have to prioritize when it comes to to investing in development. You know, for instance, when we applied comprehensive wealth in specific countries, such as Trinidad and Tobago, we see an entirely different dimension of national progress. So, for example, the country's GDP has doubled since 1995, and that's largely driven by fossil fuels, and largely driven by the energy sector. And what this shows is that this huge investment isn't necessarily good for the long-term sustainability, because its comprehensive wealth has only increased by 11%, and it's actually starting to decline, evidently due to the loss of natural capital. So, you know, if we're looking at comprehensive wealth in a holistic sense, it's helping governments create a development path and different options that they can choose to prioritize where they develop policy and where they invest in their financial resources. So those are the three key levers: collaboration, establishing a common knowledge base, and equally helping governments better prioritize where they invest. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And I'm going to jump right again at bringing our online audience into the room with perhaps also a question that all of you, I'm going to give you the same challenge to reply in 1 or 2 words. The question is coming from Bella, who is joining us from Uganda. The question is, what gives you hope that we are moving beyond GDP? Good.
I would say women's empowerment, especially young women.
3 words: youth determination and needs.
Justice.
Mobilization.
I'm going to say 2 words: reclaiming our future. Sorry, that was 3.
Very looking forward. Thank you very much for all your participation. And I'm going to now invite to the stage for a very special announcement, and I promise we will end almost at time. I'm inviting again Özge Aykan, the director of the Beyond Lab. I'm inviting again Anu Zola, the director of statistics at UN Development. And it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage our dear partner, Lawrence Jones-Williams, the executive director of Rethinking Economics International. Please give them a round of applause. And I'm going to hand over to you in a second, but I would like actually to bring to this segment the question from Her Excellency. She asked, are we truly committed to this? And the answer is yours.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Can I quickly get this? Yeah, so thanks so much for following, for engaging. Again, in a different setup, we would have loved to open up even more the conversation, to really have you speak to us and dialogue with us. Sadly, the setup is also so, sorry for that, maybe made this way, but we look forward to hearing from you, because actually today while we're gathering, is we have an announcement to make. So we are launching a youth network for Beyond GDP. I think here and there things have a bit said about this, as part of this joint initiative between ourselves, UN Trade and Development, really ANO, and Rethinking Economics International, Lawrence, as drivers of change for that. A transformative platform at the intersection of youth leadership and economic systems transformation to break through the intergenerational glass ceiling in economic thinking that we have all established sadly still exists. So, again, relying on GDP alone has not led us to the world that we imagined to be in, right? But we're here to change it. And the youth network for Beyond GDP will be hopefully a key platform to establish that, to make sure that your voices are again connected to intergovernmental processes, because even if I maybe don't speak like one, but I am a UN official. And one of the key things we do at the UN is intergovernmental processes, right? And it is about connecting all what you have to say to those expert groups and decision-making, again, processes that are happening. So that's what the youth network will do. And key for that, again, is, and I repeat once more, to put intergenerational equity at the heart of how we design systems for the future, not an afterthought. So young people for that have to become co-creators, and please, again, engage with us. So we're working really hard to put this platform up, and this is, of course, a momentum we are sharing with you, but I can tell you a lot of hours have gone into this, in making this happen. More obviously will come, because this is also just the beginning of that platform, but we really rely also on you being part of it, and again, engaging with us on that. Through your ideas, through your values, through your energy, and really your critical thinking, please don't censor yourself. Bring to the table what you have to say. Lawrence, to you.
Great, can you hear me? Okay, so I'm going to try and be quick, because I know you all want to go on to the next sessions. But I represent Rethink Economics, an international movement of students and young people that want to change economics education, research, and practice. I think we've been brought in to help mobilize a lot of economic thinkers, but I like to think that we've also been brought into this coalition to shake up this process. We really want young people not to just be passengers or observers, but we want to hold this process accountable. We want to get genuine youth engagement, and we want to move past paternalism. We want to see young people have an active part in shaping the direction of how we move beyond GDP. And to be honest, we're thrilled to see how much momentum is behind this initiative. We actually think this is one of the really positive things that come out of this conference and some of the most recent events, and something that actually a lot of young people do really care about, because it's about how we frame the economy. Like, what is the goal of the economy? Is it endless consumerist growth? Or is it social production? Is it thinking about what does well-being look like society? There's a lot of anxiety for young people, especially with the growth of AI, the sort of digital transition. It's difficult getting good jobs in a caring society. So we're really excited to launch this youth network. It has 3 aims. It wants to contribute directly to global policy dialogues and redefine how we measure sustainable development progress, and that means we will be feeding directly into the high-level expert group on Beyond GDP, or at least this is the campaign to ensure that we do. We also want to provide educational leadership around the Beyond GDP agenda, so that this isn't just for young economic thinkers within our network, or those that are invited here today, but actually we're aligning to youth movements around the world. So we will be contributing towards supporting our network to speak to the wider youth movements that are represented here today, but also globally fighting for justice in their communities. And finally, we want to ensure that institutionalized intergenerational equity is a core principle to redesign economic systems. This is something that we have been working on with the coalition partners here today in the recent events. In the essay competition, we had 600 entrants of young people just to say what they thought Beyond GDP should move towards. So we're really, really excited to be here, and I want to say finally as well that this network is for anyone under the age of 35 at the point when you fill in the application form. But we are also looking for allies. We are looking for allies to help us support this initiative so that we can ensure that there is genuine engagement all across the process. And I'll pass over to Anna.
Thank you very much. So, UNCTAD is honored to support the youth network and already inspired by previous work within it, including the Young Researchers Essay Competition that has already fed into the process of Beyond GDP. The youth network is part of the Cellular Platform for Action initiative on Beyond GDP Global Alliance, which was announced this morning at the side event, New Approaches for Renewed International Cooperation, Insights for the Beyond GDP Global Alliance. Our youth network will contribute to this alliance to help ensure youth perspectives are embedded in the format FfD4 process, an important step towards institutionalizing intergenerational engagement.
Yes, I have the honor to wrap up. And of course, I have to also do my credentials and thank all our partners and partners in crime, and especially really also the youth office. Thank you so much. I mean, it's really amazing that Felipe could speak with us. I mean, although he could not, that he could speak at the event, although he could not be with us, because it's important that we gather the system as a collective, that which we are doing. But really, again, to the government of Germany for scaling this innovation up, because being an innovation lab, one thing I have learned as a director of such a space is there's so many innovations out there, but oftentimes actually they don't really lead to change because we don't manage to scale. And I think what's happening today is that scaling. And for that, I also want to thank Spain for having invited us, for welcoming us so warmly to this Beyond Alliance, and also actually anchoring this initiative within the Sevilla platform for action, because that's really how we have been, again, connect conversations to intergovernmental processes, then to systemic change. So thank you for that. And that's really just the beginning. So if you believe, as we do, that progress should be measured by what really creates value for all of us and the planet, for our communities, for the health of our environment, our kids, sustainability, our environment, all of that, dignity of all people, well then that's the network for you. Engage with us once more, and let's move beyond GDP together. And yeah, please let's lead the way as the voices you are for change. Thank you so much.
The moment we have all been waiting for, please scan the QR code to officially become a member and become part of the youth network on Moving Beyond GDP. Thank you very much for the engagement, for your participation. Thank you to all the panelists and partners. We look forward to working with you.